Hello students, welcome to the second session of chapter number 18 of your first PUC NCERT, that is body fluids and circulation. When it comes to body fluids and circulation, in the last session we did discuss regarding the circulatory system, the fluid which is involved in the circulatory system, that is blood, components of blood and how these components help in functioning in either transport of gases or as immune cells as well as helps in clotting. Apart from this one, we have studied about the circulatory system which is present from invertebrates until vertebrates, along with which we have also discussed the blood groups, different types of blood groups, how based on antigen and antibody these blood groups have been separated into different kinds. The 4 blood groups have different types of antigens, different types of antibodies, along with which we have also studied the RH blood grouping system, which gives us the positive or negative blood group present in human beings. Along with which we have studied about a particular type of disorder which is caused due to mixing of a positive and a negative blood, which is termed erythroblastosis fetalis. We have studied what happens in the fetus, especially in the second fetus, when this positive and negative blood do mix up and how it can be prevented or how it can be treated. In today's class, we will be studying about coagulation of blood. When it comes to coagulation of blood, what happens in coagulation of blood? Coagulation means it is controlling the excess flow of blood from the body. For example, if your body is teared open due to some accidents, the blood keeps on flowing from here. So, after few seconds what happens is the blood will start to form a network here and does not allow the movement of blood outside the body. If the individual is lacking this component in his blood, then he is termed to have hemophilia disease. When it comes to formation of network, who forms this network? In blood plasma, there will be a component called fibrin. Fibrin is the component which forms this network. This will be in its inactive form. Fibrin will be in its inactive form. Why? Because it is not necessary when there is no cut or open in the body. So, fibrin will be in its inactive form. It gets activated only when there is a tear or cut. Now, how does it get activated? This gets activated with the help of an enzyme. So, it will be in its inactive form called fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is the inactive form of fibrin. It gets converted into fibrin with the help of an enzyme called thrombin. So, thrombin is the enzyme which activates the fibrinogen when there is a cut or tear in the body and convert it into fibrin. This fibrin forms a network near the cut region, and this network region contains the dead blood cells as well as the ruptured skin, which closes the cut area in the body, forming a network and not allowing the blood flow. Now, when it comes to thrombin, this thrombin will also be in its inactive form, that will be in the form of prothrombin. Prothrombin is the inactive form of thrombin. This gets activated into thrombin when in the presence of thrombokinase enzyme. Prothrombin will also be present in the plasma just like fibrinogen. So, the blood plasma now contains prothrombin as well as fibrinogen. Both are the inactive forms of coagulation of blood or clotting of blood. When there is a tear or a cut in the body, this prothrombin gets activated in the presence of thrombokinase enzyme. Once they get activated, this thrombin acts on fibrinogen to activate it into fibrin. Once the fibrin is formed, they form a network and stops the blood from flowing and clots the blood. It is also called coagulant. So, that is how coagulation of blood takes place. Once again to discuss, ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗಾಯ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಅನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಆಗದೇ ಇರೋ ಥರ ತಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಮ್ಮ ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಎಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ ಬ್ಲಡ್ಡಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಮಾ ಕಾಂಪೊನೆಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ಕಾಂಪೊನೆಂಟ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ವಿಚ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಅ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್. ಇದು ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಥರ ಗಾಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಆಗಿ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಆಚೆ ಹೋಗದೇ ಇರೋ ಥರ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನು ಕಾಂಪೊನೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಡೆಡ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್, dead skin cells, dead blood cells, because of which one they form the network. ಈ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಬ್ಲಡ್ಡಲ್ಲಿ ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಬಾಡಿ ಒಳಗಡೆನೆ ಕ್ಲಾಟ್ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇವುಗಳು ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಇನ್ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದೇ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿ ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟೆಡ್. ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗಾಯ ಆದಾಗ ಮಾತ್ರ ಇವುಗಳು ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ ದೇ ವಿಲ್ ರಿಮೇನ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಇನ್ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್. When it comes to these fibrin being activated, ಅವುಗಳು ಇನ್ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನೋಜನ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತವೆ. ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗಾಯ ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಎಂಜೈಮ್ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಈ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನೋಜನ್ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನ್ ಆಗಿ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಕೂಡ ತನ್ನ ಇನ್ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಮಾದಲ್ಲಿ. ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಪ್ರೋಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್. ಈ ಪ್ರೋಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಥ್ರಾಂಬೋಕೈನೇಸ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ಎಂಜೈಮ್ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಆಗಿ ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ಟುಗ್ಯಾದರ್ ಇವುಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲೇ ಇರ್ತವೆ ಇನ್ ದ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಮಾ. ದೇ ಗೆಟ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟೆಡ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ ಒನ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್, ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆನ್ ದ ಬಾಡಿ ಈಸ್ ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟೆಡ್ ಟು ಅ ಕಟ್ ಆರ್ ಅ ಟೇರ್. ಮೊದಲಿಗೆ ಪ್ರೋಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಥ್ರಾಂಬಿನ್ ಫೈಬ್ರಿನೋಜನನ್ನು ಆಕ್ಟಿವೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ಫೈಬ್ರಿನನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಹೌ ದೇರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ coagulation of blood in the body. Here these are the chain enzymatic reaction which is called cascade reaction, and for this it is very much necessary that calcium ions are very much important so that the clotting process takes place. It's a chain enzymatic reaction which is also called cascade reaction, and it requires calcium ions so to clot the blood. So next we'll study about the lymph vessels. When it comes to lymph or tissue fluid, when the blood passes to the capillaries, so if you imagine this is the capillary in the tissues, they will release some of the fluids into the interstitial space which is termed interstitial fluid. This interstitial fluid consists of some of the blood cells as well as few nutrients and gases. So this interstitial fluid gets collected in the larger vessel which is called lymphatic vessel. This lymphatic vessels now contains the fluid which is called lymph. The lymph contains, as I have told, some of the gases, some of the nutrients as well as blood cells. Particular blood cell present in the lymph will be lymphocytes. These lymphocytes are defensive in function and plays a major role in our immunity. When these lymphatic vessels collect the lymph, they drain it into the major vessels so that the cells can easily exchange the nutrients between themselves, and the blood as well as exchange of gases will also be easier. This lymph doesn't only helps in exchange of gases or nutrients, it also helps in absorption of fat as well as transfer of the hormones. When it comes to absorption of fat by the lymph, it can be seen in the intestinal villi. So in between the intestinal villi there is a region called lacteal, especially in the microvilli region. This helps in absorption of the fat because of the lymph. So that's about the lymph or the tissue fluid. Lymph, it is when the blood passes into the capillary, in the tissues, they release some of the fluid along with water soluble substances into the open space which is called interstitial space. This is collected in a vessel called lymphatic vessel, and now the fluid within the lymphatic vessel is termed lymph. This lymph contains of lymphocytes, some of the nutrients, gases, helps in transport of hormones and absorption of fat. The lymphocytes present in this lymph help in immunity, that means they are defensive in function. Whereas when it comes to absorption of fat, that can be seen in the microvilli of the intestine, which helps in formations of lacteals. So that is about lymph. Next we will have to study about types of circulatory system. When it comes to types of circulatory pathway, here in circulatory pathway they are of two types, open and second one is closed. When it comes to open type of circulatory pathway, in open if you see the cells are here are directly in contact with the body fluids. In case of open circulatory system, the cells are directly having contact with the body fluids. They can exchange what they want and release what they are not in necessity of. So that can be done in open circulatory system, wherein they do not have any capillaries or vessels carrying this body fluids. So that is about open circulatory system, which can be identified in case of arthropods. Most of the arthropods will be having this open type of circulatory system like cockroaches. When it comes to closed circulatory system, in closed circulatory system, if the cell is placed like this, then there are capillaries or vessels which carry the body fluid within, and there is exchange of nutrients or gases between the cells, and waste substances will be drained back into the blood. So here there is involvement of closed system where the blood capillaries, vessels are involved to carry the body fluid, unlike open circulatory system. In case of open circulatory system, there is no presence of capillaries or vessels which carry the blood. The cells are in direct contact with the body fluid. So that is about difference between open and closed circulatory system, where closed you can find in almost all the vertebrates and even in annelids, whereas open it is found in arthropods, Aschelminthes and few of the Platyhelminthes. That is about two different types. When it comes to vertebrates, the closed circulatory system is different in pieces, in reptiles, in aves as well as in mammals. When it comes to fishes or pieces, they have a circulatory system which is made up of only two chambers. One is the auricle, one is the ventricle. So they do not purify the blood. That means the exchange of gases, oxygen is not purified in the auricles and ventricles because they directly take it through their respiratory system. So fishes have two chambered heart. When it comes to reptiles, reptiles have three chambered heart. Reptiles have three chambered heart except crocodile. Crocodile have four chambered heart, whereas rest of the reptiles have three chambered heart, where it is having a right auricle, left auricle and one ventricle. That means the blood is purified here, but it gets mixed up in the ventricles. Here if you see in reptiles or amphibians, both amphibians also have three chambered heart. When it comes to reptiles or amphibians, in this three chambered heart, what happens is there will be purification of blood until they reach the auricles, but when it comes to the ventricle they will be mixed up. So the body of the organism is adjusted to partially oxygenated blood. So, when in case of frog, they have other methods of taking up the oxygen, that will be through their skin during aestivation or through their gills during tadpole stage and in adult stage through their lungs. So, next one is aves and mammals. Aves and mammals normally have 4 chambered heart, where it includes 2 auricles and 2 ventricles. Right auricle and right ventricle carries of the deoxygenated blood, left auricle and left ventricle carries the oxygenated blood. That means we are purely getting here separated blood, that is oxygenated blood can be taken up by the cells and deoxygenated is going to the lungs for exchange of gases. This is how the closed circulatory system is divided into different types. One type which is present in fishes with only 2 chambered heart, that is 1 auricle and 1 ventricle. When it comes to reptiles and amphibians, they have 3 chambered heart including 2 auricles and 1 ventricle. Here reptiles only, crocodile is an exception because it is having 4 chambered heart. When it comes to 4 chambered heart, it can be seen in either aves as well as in mammals. So, that is about the circulatory pathway as well as types of circulatory system present in different organisms of closed circulatory system. Next we will have to study about the human circulatory system, for which we will have to draw the human heart so that it is clearly understood. So this is the diagram of a human heart or human circulation or blood vascular system. When it comes to human heart, I have already discussed that it is made up of 4 chambers, 2 auricles and 2 ventricles, where the right side of the heart, that is, this is right auricle and right ventricle, which carries the deoxygenated blood, that means which has lesser amount of oxygen, whereas the left part of the heart, that is the left auricle and left ventricle, which carries the oxygenated blood. Now let us study in detail about the human circulatory system. So here there are major vessels called superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. These larger vessels, that is superior vena cava, takes the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, and inferior vena cava draws the deoxygenated blood from the lower part, andre abdomen part inda deoxygenated blood anna heart ತೆಕೊಂಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸುಪೀರಿಯರ್ ವೆನಾ ಕೇವಾ ಬಾಡಿಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಎಬ್ಡಾಮನ್ ಗಿಂತ ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಡಿಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಅನ್ನು ಹಾರ್ಟಿಗೆ ತೆಕೊಂಬರುತ್ತೆ. ವಿಚ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಹಾರ್ಟ್? ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ರೈಟ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಹಾರ್ಟ್. ಒನ್ಸ್ ದ ರೈಟ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್ ಇಸ್ 3/4 ಫಿಲ್ಡ್, ಮುಕ್ಕಾಲು ರೈಟ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಫಿಲ್ ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ, ಯಾವ ಬ್ಲಡ್? ಡಿಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಫಿಲ್ ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ 2 ವಾಲ್ಸ್, ಅಂದರೆ auricles, if you consider this is auricle and this is ventricle, there is a valve which closes the auricle. So once the blood is 3/4 filled in the auricle, the valve opens downwards. When it opens downwards, the blood from the auricles get transferred into the ventricles. ಈ right auricle and right ventricle ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಇರುವ walls ಅನ್ನು tricuspid valve ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. This tricuspid means 3 cup like walls. This tricuspid walls opens up towards the lower side so that the blood from the right auricle can pass into the right ventricle. ಒಂದು ಸರಿ ventricle fill ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ this cuspid walls, tricuspid walls will be closed so that there is no reverse movement of the blood from the ventricles into the auricles. Now once the blood is filled in the ventricle, what happens is it is taken up by the pulmonary artery so that it can be converted into oxygenated blood. So ventricles in the deoxygenated blood pulmonary artery ge transfer ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. When it is transferred into the pulmonary artery, there are semilunar walls. Semilunar walls andre half moon shaped walls. This guard the pulmonary artery. This guard the pulmonary artery so that the blood does not reverse flowed into the right ventricles. So once the blood is taken up into the pulmonary artery, the semilunar walls also close. This pulmonary artery, you can see that it is divided into 2 branches here. One carries the blood into the left lung, another carries the blood into the right lung. In the chapter number 17, that is respiration, we have come across the exchange of gases between the blood as well as the lungs. So the same process takes place here. Now the deoxygenated blood is converted into the oxygenated blood in the lungs. So deoxygenated blood right auricle ge superior ಹಾಗೆ inferior vena cava ದಿಂದ ಬಂದು ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ರೈಟ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್ ಮುಕ್ಕಾಲು ತುಂಬಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಟ್ರೈಕಸ್ಪಿಡ್ ವಾಲ್ವ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಓಪನ್ ಆಗ್ತವೆ. ಬ್ಲಡ್ ರೈಟ್ ಆರಿಕಲ್ ಇಂದ ರೈಟ್ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ಗೆ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಒನ್ಸ್ ದ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಇಸ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ಸ್, ಈ ಟ್ರೈಕಸ್ಪಿಡ್ ವಾಲ್ಸು ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾಕೆ? ಸೊ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ದ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಇನ್ ದ ರಿವರ್ಸ್ ಡಿರೆಕ್ಷನ್. ರೈಟ್ ವೆಂಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಡಿಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಈಸ್ ಕ್ಯಾರಿಡ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ. ಈ ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆಮಿಲೂನಾರ್ ವಾಲ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಇದು ಬ್ಲಡ್ ರಿವರ್ಸ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಗದೆ ಇರೋ ಥರ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಪಲ್ಮನರಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ರಿ 2 ಬ್ರಾಂಚ್ ಆಗಿ ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಒಂದು ಬ್ರಾಂಚ್ ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ಲಂಗ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಬ್ರಾಂಚ್ ರೈಟ್ ಲಂಗ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ದ ರೀಸನ್ ವೈ ಇಟ್ ಗೋಸ್ ಟು ದ ಲಂಗ್ ಇಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಫ್ ಗ್ಯಾಸಸ್ ಟು ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ದ ಡಿಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಆಕ್ಸಿಜನೇಟೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಒನ್ಸ್ ದ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಇಸ್ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟೆಡ್ into oxygenated form, they are brought back into the left auricle. The blood is brought back into the left auricle and that is done by pulmonary vein. Each lung produces 2 veins. Each lung produces 2 veins. So, together there are 4 veins. Right lung in the 2 pulmonary veins barutte. Left lung in the 2 pulmonary veins barutte. Even though I have written the pulmonary veins here, they open up only in the left auricle region. So, now in the left auricle, through the pulmonary veins, deoxygenated blood which was converted into oxygenated in the lungs is brought into the left auricle. Left auricle mukkalu thumbud takshana, that is 3/4 of the left auricle once it is filled. Again the walls between the auricle and ventricle opens up downwards. Here the wall is called mitral wall or bicuspid. 2 cup like structures, mitral wall or bicuspid walls are present. So, this bicuspid walls open up so that the oxygenated blood from the left auricle is transferred into the left ventricle. Once the left ventricle is filled, the bicuspid or mitral walls close, and from the left ventricle the blood is taken into the larger vessel that is called aorta, which is again guarded by semilunar walls. Now, in the aorta it contains of oxygenated blood. This oxygenated blood through different capillaries or vessels are transferred into the cells for nutrient exchange as well as exchange of gases. This is how the blood circulates within the heart. When it comes to the muscles which are involved here, it contains of cardiac muscles. Why cardiac muscles only in the keladre? The outer layer of the heart is called pericardium, and it contains pericardial fluid which helps the heart to tolerate the friction or control the heart when it is under shock. So, that is how the cardiac muscles, especially the pericardial walls, help in protecting the heart because of this pericardial fluid which is present between the pericardiums. That is about human circulation or blood vascular system. Once again to discuss, this human heart is made up of 4 chambers where 2 auricles and 2 ventricles are present. Auricles are normally called collecting chambers as they collect the oxygenated or deoxygenated blood, and when it comes to the ventricles, these are called pumping chambers because they help in pumping the blood. When it comes to the location of this heart, it is present in the thoracic region, and single heart is the size of your left fist. Okay, that size is the heart. As you keep growing, the fist keeps growing as well as your heart also grows. So, here our heart is not under the control of our brain, it is controlled by its own muscles called cardiac muscles. There is a protective layer in heart which is called pericardium, which contains this pericardial fluid. This pericardial fluid helps in avoiding the shock or tolerating the friction. When it comes to the inner parts of the human heart, the right side of the heart, that is both the auricle and ventricle, carries the deoxygenated blood, and the left part of the heart carries the oxygenated blood. From the superior and inferior vena cavas, the deoxygenated blood is brought into the right auricle, which when 3/4 filled opens up the tricuspid wall so that the deoxygenated blood is transferred into the right ventricle. Once the blood is collected here in the ventricle, the tricuspid walls close. The blood from the right ventricle is transferred into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery is guarded by semilunar walls. Once they are guarded by semilunar walls here, it does not allow the reverse flow of the blood. The pulmonary artery is branched so that the blood is carried into both the lungs for exchange of gases, so that it gets converted from deoxygenated to oxygenated. Once the oxygenated blood is ready, through the pulmonary vein they are carried into the left auricle. In together there are 4 pulmonary veins, each lung produces 2 pulmonary veins. So, the left auricle now has oxygenated blood. This oxygenated blood is now transferred into the left ventricle through a valve called bicuspid valve. This bicuspid valve again closes when the ventricle is filled. Left ventricle now transfers the blood into the aorta, which is again guarded by semilunar walls. This aorta carries the blood into different regions of the body, especially the cells, which requires oxygen for their metabolic process. So, that is how human circulatory system or blood vascular system works. Next, we will have to study about conduction of human heart. So, this is the diagram for conduction of heart. So, I have already told that human heart is not under the control of brain, instead we have a myogenic heart. Myogenic heart means the conduction of heart is controlled by the heart muscles, especially the cardiac muscles. When it comes to the initiation of conduction of heart, so this is the right part of the heart and this becomes the left part. When it comes to the auricles, the collecting chambers act simultaneously. That is, to the left auricle, the pulmonary veins get the oxygenated blood, and to the right auricle, superior and inferior vena cavas get the deoxygenated blood. The both process takes place simultaneously. Once the blood is filled in the auricles, it automatically activates the first region, which is called sinoatrial node. ಈ sinoatrial node ಅನ್ನು ಪೇಸ್ ಮೇಕರ್ ಅಂತಲೂ ಕರೀತಾರೆ, because it shows the maximum action potential which is responsible for the conduction of heart. So almost about 70 to 75 electrical signals get activated when the auricles get filled and sinoatrial node is activated. This sinoatrial node initiates the conduction and transfer the signal into the AV node. This AV node is called atrioventricular node. When the signals transfer from sinoatrial node into AV node, it is done with the help of internodal pathway. So sinoatrial node activate ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಎರಡು auricles ಗಳು ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ತವೆ. ಎರಡು auricles ಹೇಗೆ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, the sinoatrial node spreads the signal throughout both the auricles, both the left and right auricles. Both of the auricles contract simultaneously so that they can open the tricuspid and bicuspid valves. Once the sinoatrial node passes the signals into the AV node through the internodal pathway, this AV node is divided into two branches, which is called bundle of His. One bundle of His transfer through the left ventricle, another through the right ventricle. So once the bicuspid and tricuspid valves open, the ventricles are now filled with the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. The right part is filled with deoxygenated blood, left is filled with oxygenated blood. So ಈ signals AV node ಇಂದ bundle of His ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಇಡೀ ventricle ಗೆ ಹರಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೆ. So this bundle of His is again further divided into left bundle of His and right bundle of His, which is further branched into Purkinje fibers. This Purkinje fibers transfer the signals throughout the ventricles so that the ventricles can now undergo contraction. When the auricles are contracted, the ventricles will be in the relaxed form. When the ventricles contract, the auricles will be in the relaxed form. So once the blood is transferred from the auricles into ventricles, ventricles will now start to contract and auricles will be in its relaxed state and will be collecting the blood from either lungs or from the vena cavas. Once the blood is transferred into the ventricles, these undergo contraction due to the signals passed from AV node into bundle of His and then into Purkinje fibers. The ventricles will now contract and pass the blood from the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery, from the left ventricle into the aorta. So this is how the whole conduction process takes place, which is activated or initiated by sinoatrial node as it produces 70 to 75 electrical signals or produces high action potential. It is termed pacemaker. So this is the region which conducts the heart. Now when it comes to the initiation of this one, it takes place when the auricles are filled with oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. The signals are full transferred into the auricular walls and then it is passed on into AV node through the internodal pathway. This AV node is branched into left bundle of His and right bundle of His, where the right bundle of His or left bundle of His are further branched into small fibers called Purkinje fibers. Once the blood is transferred from the auricles into the ventricles through the auricular contraction, the blood is now filled in the ventricles. Now the ventricles will be having the signals which is passed from AV node through the bundle of His and Purkinje fibers. So the ventricles will start to contract. When the ventricles are contracting, the auricles will be relaxing and taking up the deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. From the ventricles now the blood transfers into the pulmonary artery, that is from the right ventricle, and from the left ventricle it transfers into the aorta. So, this is how the conduction of heart takes place in human. As I have told, we have a myogenic heart. Our heart is independent of our brain. The conduction of heart is initiated by the heart itself from the sinoatrial node. That is why it is termed pacemaker. So, that is all in today's session. In today's session we have learnt regarding coagulation of blood, lymph vessels, conduction of heart as well as human circulatory system or the blood vascular system. So, in next class we will be learning about the cardiac cycle, double circulation, some of the regulatory activities, ECG and finally disorders. Thank you.